I, 29F, was sitting on a wicker chair surrounded by pastel-colored balloons and gifts wrapped in shiny paper with little ducks and rattles on them. It was my baby shower for my second child, a day that was supposed to be happy. My friends were there, my own mother was there, and my husband Mark's family was there. The air was thick with the scent of cake and the sound of forced, polite laughter. My mother-in-law, Carol, was holding court, as she always did. She moved through the small gathering like a queen surveying her subjects, offering a tight smile here, a condescending pat on the arm there. For years, I had learned to navigate her moods, to absorb her little digs and carry on. Mark, my husband, 30M, always told me to just let it go. "That's just how she is," he would say, a phrase that had become the unofficial motto of our marriage when it came to his family. I had tried. I really had. When our first son, Leo, was born, Carol had criticized everything from the name we chose to the way I held him. She would compare him constantly to her daughter Jenna's children. Jenna was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. She had 3 kids, a perfect house, and a life that Carol presented as a testament to her own successful mothering. My life, by contrast, was always found wanting. I worked part-time, our house was smaller, and I was, in her words, a bit too sensitive. I had learned to build a wall around myself during family events, a quiet space in my mind where her words couldn't penetrate too deeply. But being pregnant made me feel vulnerable, and the wall was starting to crumble. She made her way over to the gift table, where a beautiful, hand-knitted baby blanket I had spent months making was displayed. It was a complex pattern of soft blues and grays, a labor of love for my unborn son. Carol picked it up, her fingers pinching the yarn as if testing for quality. "Oh, that's ambitious," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "You have so much time on your hands." It was a classic Carol comment, a compliment wrapped in an insult. I felt the familiar sting but just smiled and nodded. My friend Sarah caught my eye from across the room and gave me a sympathetic look. "Enough for you to handle." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room turned to me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a burning wave of shame and anger. It was so cruel, so public. She wasn't just insulting my ability to be a mother, she was making a proclamation about my life, my body, my family, as if she had any right. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My mind was a blank, filled with roaring static. All I could think was, she did it. She finally broke me in front of everyone. My own mother looked horrified. Sarah looked ready to commit murder. Jenna, my sister-in-law, just looked down at her lap, pretending she hadn't heard. And Mark. Mark was just sitting there, a few feet away from me. For a second, I saw the familiar look on his face, the one that said, "Just ignore her, don't make a scene." My heart sank. He was going to let it happen. He was going to let her humiliate me and say nothing. But then, something shifted. The passive, peacekeeping expression on his face hardened into something I had never seen before. It was like watching a storm gather in a matter of seconds. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. He stood up, his whole body tense. He was taller than most people in the room, and his sudden movement drew even more attention. He turned to face his mother. His voice, when he spoke, was not just loud. It was a shout, a raw, booming sound that echoed in the small living room and made several people flinch. "Mom!" he yelled, his voice cracking with fury. "What is wrong with you? We will have as many children as we want, and you will not speak to my wife like that again." The shock in the room was palpable. No one had ever heard Mark raise his voice to his mother. He was the good son, the quiet one, the peacemaker. Carol's jaw dropped. The smug satisfaction on her face vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. She looked as if he had physically struck her. Then, as if on cue, her face crumpled. The tears started to flow, big, theatrical drops that ran down her cheeks. "I was just concerned," she wailed. her voice high and pitiful. "She's so delicate." We walked out of the house without looking back, leaving Carol sobbing in Jenna's arms, the half-eaten cake and scattered gifts a testament to the disaster her words had created. The car ride home was completely silent. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle from me as I tried to hold back my own tears. Mark stared straight ahead, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. I had never seen him so angry. It was a side of him that was entirely new to me. He was usually so calm, so determined to avoid conflict at all costs. His explosion at the party was more shocking to me than his mother's cruelty. I had grown accustomed to her behavior, but I had also grown accustomed to my husband's passivity. I replayed the scene in my head, the smug look on Carol's face, the sudden hot shame that flooded me, and then Mark's voice cutting through it all. He had defended me. He had stood up for me, for us, in a way he never had before. The tears that were welling up in my eyes weren't just from humiliation anymore. They were from a confusing mix of relief and fear. Relief that he had finally seen what I had been enduring for years, and fear of what this new chapter in our family dynamics would bring. When we pulled into our driveway, he turned off the car but didn't move to get out. He just sat there, breathing heavily. I finally found my voice. "What was that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned to look at me, and I saw the exhaustion and fury still warring in his eyes. "I'm done, honey," he said, his voice ragged. "I'm just done with her. I can't do it anymore." I reached out and put my hand on his arm. "Mark, thank you," I said softly. "You have no idea how much that meant to me." He shook his head, a look of self-loathing on his face. "I should have done it years ago. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I let her treat you like that for so long. I always thought it was easier to keep the peace." "I know," I said. And I did. I understood his desire to avoid a war with his own mother. But the peace he had been keeping had come at a high price, and I was the one who had escalated. She always had a sob story, a crisis that only he could solve. She would praise him for being so responsible, so generous, unlike his father who was terrible with money. She made him feel like her savior. He admitted that he had never told me the full extent of it because he was ashamed. He was a grown man, and his mother was treating him like a personal bank machine. He never saw a cent of it paid back. When he would gently ask about it, she would burst into tears, accusing him of being selfish and ungrateful after all she had done for him. So he stopped asking. The real turning point for him had come a few weeks before the shower. Carol had called him in a panic. Jenna had a financial emergency. Her husband had lost a big commission at work, and they were in danger of missing their mortgage payment. Carol begged Mark for a large sum of money, thousands of dollars, promising it was the last time. She swore him to secrecy, saying she didn't want to worry his father or embarrass Jenna. Mark, feeling the familiar pressure, had transferred the money. But a few days later, he was scrolling through social media and saw pictures Jenna had posted. She and her husband weren't struggling to pay their mortgage. They were on a luxury vacation in the Caribbean, sipping cocktails on a white sand beach. The photos were tagged with the name of an expensive, all-inclusive resort. The dates of the trip coincided exactly with when she was supposed to be in a financial crisis. "I felt like such an idiot," Mark said, his voice thick with shame. "She played me. Both of them did. They lied to my face, took my money, and went on vacation. Money that we could have used for our own family, for this new baby." I was stunned. I had no idea this was happening. I knew Carol favored Jenna, but I didn't realize she was actively stealing from her own son to fund her daughter's lifestyle. It was a level of deception that was hard to comprehend. "So when she said that today," he continued, his anger returning, "about this being our last baby, it all just clicked. It wasn't about her being concerned for you. It was about the money. Another baby for us meant another person she couldn't ask me for money for. It was all about control. Controlling me, controlling our finances, controlling the size of our family." And I just snapped. I couldn't lick, and he always told us grandkids that he had set something aside for us. A trust fund. I nodded. Mark had mentioned this once or twice before, but always in passing. What about it? I asked. Well, after he died, Mom told me and Jenna that he had left a trust, but it was very small. She said that after taxes and fees, there was barely anything left. She gave me a few $1,000s for a down payment on my first car, and said that was pretty much my share. She said the rest had to be used for his estate's legal costs. I was young, I didn't question it. But now, I'm not so sure. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. She's always been so secretive about it. And about all family finances, really. My dad has no idea about any of it. She handles everything. She keeps all the important documents locked in a big metal safe in the study. Old bank statements, deeds, his will. Everything. I asked her about the will once, years ago, just because I was curious, and she got incredibly defensive. She said it was private family business and I didn't need to see it. A new, darker suspicion began to creep into my mind. If she was capable of lying about thousands of dollars for a vacation, what else was she capable of lying about? An entire inheritance? Mark, I said slowly, do you think she lied about the trust? He looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw the dawning of a terrible possibility. I don't know, he whispered. But for the first time in my life, I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of that thought settling over us. The baby shower incident was no longer the main issue. It was a symptom of a much deeper disease in his family. The insults, the favoritism, the financial manipulation. It was all connected. It was all part of a larger pattern of control and deceit, orchestrated by his mother. We have to find out, I said, my voice firm. The hurt and humiliation I had felt earlier were being replaced by a cold, clear resolve. We can't let this go. If she did this, she didn't just steal from you. She stole from our family, from Leo, and from this new baby. We have to know the truth. Mark nodded. Mark decided to call his father, David. David had always been a passive figure in the family, a quiet man who seemed to exist in the shadow of his overbearing wife. Mark's hope was that, away from Carol's influence, his father might be more forthcoming. Perhaps he knew something, or at least could be reasoned with. Mark made the call the next evening, putting the phone on speaker so I could listen. His voice was calm and steady, betraying none of the turmoil we were feeling. Hey, Dad. How are you? I'm all right, son. David's voice came through the speaker, sounding tired. Things are tense here. I can imagine, Mark said. Listen, I'm not calling about that. I wanted to ask you something. Do you remember Grandpa's will? The trust he set up for me and Jenna? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. The trust? David finally said, his voice wary. What about it? I was just thinking about it, Mark said, choosing his words carefully. Mom always said there wasn't much in it. I was wondering if you remembered the details. Do you know who the lawyer was who handled the estate? David cleared his throat. Mark, your mother handles all of that. It's complicated, you know, with the taxes and all. It was a long time ago. I know, but it's important, Dad, Mark pressed. I just want to understand it better. Could you just tell me the name of the law firm? I don't think I should, David stammered. Your mother wouldn't like me getting involved. It's all taken care of. Don't stir up trouble, son. Just let it be. Mark's jaw tightened. Dad, this is my inheritance we're talking about. I have a right to know. And your mother told you what you needed to know. David's voice suddenly became sharp, defensive. She has always done what's best for this family. You should trust her. After the scene you made at the shower, you should be trying to make things better, not worse. And with that, the conversation was over. Mark said a terse goodbye and hung up. He slumped back against the couch, looking utterly defeated. He's in on it, Mark said, his voice flat. Or he's too scared of her to do the right thing. Either way, it's a dead end. I felt a surge of frustration. It was clear that David was She stole from him? To send the golden child to a resort? Oh, I would have done more than shout. That woman is a monster. Her anger was validating. It made me feel less crazy, less alone. I know, I said. But the worst part is, we think that's just the tip of the iceberg. We think she stole his entire inheritance. Okay, Sarah said, her voice shifting from angry to practical. Okay, so what's the plan? You can't just accuse her, you need proof. Hard proof. It's in a safe at her house, I explained. The will, bank statements, everything. We have no idea how to get to it. You need a lawyer, she said immediately. A good one. But a lawyer can't do anything without evidence. You need to get into that safe. Is there any way? A spare key? Does Mark know the combination? No, I said, feeling hopeless. Carol is the only one who knows it. She keeps it under lock and key. We brainstormed for a while, coming up with increasingly outlandish ideas, from hiring a safecracker to staging a fake emergency. Nothing seemed plausible. Then, as we were about to give up, Mark, who had been listening to my side of the conversation, walked into the room. His eyes were wide with a sudden memory. "Wait a minute," he said, taking the phone from me. "Sarah, hi. I just remembered something. My dad, he's a creature of habit. He writes everything down. Passwords, account numbers, everything. He says his memory is a sieve. My mom hates it. She says he's a security risk." He started pacing the room, his mind clearly working. "A few years ago, I was helping him in his workshop in the garage. He was complaining about Mom changing the safe combination again, and he muttered something under his breath. He said, 'Good thing I know where to keep a copy so I don't get locked out of my own life.' He keeps everything important written down in a little black book he hides in his workshop." A thrill of hope shot through me. "Do you think the combination would be in there?" I asked. "It's a long shot," Mark admitted, "and his workshop is his sacred space. Carol never, ever goes in there. She says it's too messy. If he wrote it down anywhere, it would be in..." Distracted, you slip out to the garage and find that book. It felt like something out of a spy movie. Deceitful and nerve-wracking. But it was the only way. We had to play Carol's game, using her own tactics against her. We had to wear a mask of civility while searching for the weapon that would bring her down. Sure enough, 2 days later, the call came. It was Carol. Her voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with false contrition. "Mark, dear," she said. "I feel just awful about what happened. I was completely out of line. I'd love for you and your lovely wife to come for dinner on Sunday, so we can clear the air and be a family again." Mark looked at me, his hand over the receiver. I gave him a firm nod. "Okay, Mom," he said, his voice impressively neutral. "We'll be there." The days leading up to the dinner were fraught with tension. We went over the plan again and again. Mark described the layout of the workshop, where he thought his dad might hide the book. We decided that I would be the one to create the diversion. It had to be something that would specifically require Carol's attention, something she would consider a domestic crisis that only she could properly manage. When Sunday arrived, I felt sick to my stomach. Getting dressed felt like putting on a costume for a part I didn't want to play. As we drove to his parents' house, we were mostly silent, each lost in our own anxieties. "Are we really doing this?" Mark asked as we pulled onto their street. "We have to," I said, my voice more confident than I felt. "Just remember why we're doing it." The moment we walked through the door, the performance began. Carol enveloped Mark in a dramatic hug, telling him how much she had missed him. She gave me a frosty air kiss next to my cheek. "So glad you could come," she said, her eyes cold. Jenna was there, standing behind her mother like a loyal soldier, her arms crossed over her chest. David just hovered in the background, looking uncomfortable. Dinner was an exercise in supreme self-control. The conversation was painfully stilted. Carol and Jenna talked exclusively to each other, recounting stories about Jenna's kids and pointedly ignoring me. I focused on eating my food, pushing mashed potatoes around my plate. Mark did his best to engage his dad in a
Up. Mom, let's get you to the kitchen. We need to blot that immediately. It worked perfectly.
The two of them bustled off toward the kitchen, completely engrossed in the crisis of the wet blouse. David, ever the bystander, just sat there looking helpless. In the chaos, I caught Mark's eye and gave him the slightest of nods. He stood up casually. "I'm just going to get some air," he announced to his father, who barely seemed to notice. Then he was gone, slipping out the back door that led to the garage. My heart was pounding in my chest. I had to keep them distracted. I followed them into the kitchen, offering a flurry of useless apologies. "I can't believe I did that. Let me help. Is there any club soda?" My babbling only seemed to annoy Carol more, which was exactly what I wanted. She and Jenna were so focused on the stain, they were completely oblivious to the fact that Mark was gone. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. I could hear Carol muttering about my clumsiness, about how I was probably doing it on purpose. I just kept apologizing, playing the part of the flustered, pregnant daughter-in-law. Every creak of the floorboards from the other room made me jump. I was terrified Mark would get caught. Then, I saw him. He appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, his face pale and his expression unreadable. He had been gone for maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like an hour. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. My heart sank. He didn't find it. The whole plan was a failure. He walked back to the table and sat down. I made my excuses and followed him, leaving Carol and Jenna to their stain removal project. I sat down opposite him, my mind racing. What now? Was this the end of the road? Under the table, out of sight of his father, Mark slid his phone across to me. The screen was lit up. On it was a photo. It was a close-up of a page from a small, worn black notebook. There was a list of dates and what looked like random words, and at the bottom of the page, a series of numbers was written next to the words safe. He had found it. He had the combination. I looked up at him, and he gave me a slow, deliberate nod. Stronger than the fear. Our opportunity came sooner than we expected. Jenna called Mark a few days later, her voice filled with excitement. Their local town was holding its annual Founders' Day festival that coming Saturday. It was an all-day event, and she was gushing about how she had bought tickets for the whole family as a peace offering for the recent unpleasantness. There was a pancake breakfast, a parade, and a concert in the evening. "Mom is so excited," she said. "She wants us all to go together, to be a family again. Please say you'll come, Mark. It would mean so much to her." Mark played his part beautifully. He feigned reluctance, then allowed himself to be convinced. He told her we would love to go, but that I wasn't feeling up to the full day's events. The pregnancy was making me tired. We would meet them there for the parade in the afternoon. Jenna bought it completely. The plan was set. We knew that Carol, David, and Jenna would be gone from the house from early morning until late at night. That was our window. On Saturday morning, we watched from our car, parked down the street from their house, as David's car pulled out of the driveway with all 3 of them inside. They were dressed for a day of festivities, Carol looking particularly pleased with herself, as if she had successfully maneuvered her family back into alignment. We waited for 20 minutes, just to be sure they were truly gone. The silence on their street was deafening. "Ready?" I asked Mark, my heart hammering against my ribs. He nodded, his face grim. "Let's do this." We drove up and parked in their driveway, trying to look as casual as possible. Mark still had an old key to the house from when he was a teenager. He had never given it back. He fumbled with the lock for a moment, his hands shaking, before the door clicked open. Stepping inside felt like a massive transgression. The house was quiet and still, filled with the familiar scent of Carol's potpourri. It felt wrong to be there, like we were ghosts haunting our own past. We didn't waste any time. We went straight to the study. It was a small, dark room lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that I was sure no one had ever read. Against the far wall, partially hidden behind a large mahogany desk, was the safe. It was bigger than I had imagined, a heavy gray metal box that looked immovable and impenetrable. "No, wait," Mark said, his voice tight with concentration. "Dad wrote this down recently. It has to be right. Let me try again." He started over, turning the dial even more slowly and deliberately this time. He was muttering the numbers under his breath. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He finished the sequence again and paused, his hand on the handle. He gave it a sharp, decisive pull. This time, there was a loud metallic clunk. The heavy door swung open. We both let out a shaky breath of relief. For a moment, we just stared into the dark interior of the safe. It was filled with manila folders, stacks of papers tied with string, and a few small jewelry boxes. It was the treasure chest of Carol's secrets. "Okay," I said, finding my voice. "Let's be quick. We're looking for the will and bank statements." We pulled the files out and laid them on the floor, our hands moving with frantic urgency. The first folder was filled with property deeds and insurance policies. The second contained old tax returns. And then we found it. A large, thick envelope, yellowed with age. Written on the front in elegant, faded cursive were the words, "Last Will and Testament of George M. Anderson, my husband's grandfather." With trembling fingers, Mark broke the brittle wax seal and unfolded the document. It was several pages long, filled with dense legal language. We scanned it quickly, looking for the section about the grandchildren's trust. And then we saw it. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a small trust, it was a massive one. The will clearly stated that his grandfather had left a substantial portfolio of stocks and bonds to be placed in a trust, with the principal and all earnings to be divided equally between his two grandchildren, Mark and Jenna. The document specified that each grandchild was to receive their full share upon their 25th birthday. Mark was 30. He should have received this money 5 years ago. The amount listed in the will was staggering. It was life-changing money. It was enough to buy a house, pay for college for our kids, and secure our future completely. I looked at Mark. All the color had drained from his face. He looked like he was going to be sick. "She lied," he whispered. "She lied about all of it." But the will was only the beginning. We dug deeper into
First house labeled Jenna Real Estate Assistance. Then came the regular monthly withdrawals, thousands of dollars at a time, labeled Jenna Lifestyle Support. We saw payments made directly from the trust account to a luxury car dealership. We saw payments to an expensive private school, the one Jenna's children attended. As we flipped through the pages, a sickening story emerged. Carol hadn't just lied about the size of the trust, she had systematically looted it. She had treated it like her own personal piggy bank to fund her daughter's entire adult life. She had given Jenna the perfect house, the perfect car, the perfect schools for her children, all with money that was half Mark's. And what had Mark received? A used car, and a series of loans from his own mother, which we now realized was her giving him small, insulting scraps of his own money and making him feel guilty and indebted for it. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She hadn't just stolen his money, she had stolen his security and his independence, all while building up his sister into the perfect daughter he could never compete with. We found a more recent statement, from just a few weeks ago. There was a large transfer out of the trust account. The memo line read, "J. Family Emergency." It was the money for the Caribbean vacation. The proof was right there, in black and white. Mark sank back against the wall, the papers scattered around him. He looked completely broken. This was a betrayal beyond anything he could have comprehended. It wasn't just about money. It was about his entire life, his entire relationship with his mother. It had all been a lie. She hadn't been protecting him or providing for him. She had been using him. Her praise for his financial responsibility was just a way to keep him from asking questions. Her constant criticism of me, our home, our life, was a way to keep him feeling small and undeserving, so he would never think to challenge her authority. And the comment at the baby shower. It suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. "I'm glad this is your last baby." It wasn't a judgment on my mothering skills. It was a financial calculation. Every child we had was a potential future expense, a drain on the family resources she was secretly controlling. She didn't want us to have more children, because she didn't want Mark to have more financial responsibilities that might make him look closer at his. Using our phones to photograph every document, every page of the will, every bank statement, every transfer slip. We worked in silence, the only sound the soft click of the phone's camera. When we were done, we carefully put everything back in the folders, placed the folders back in the safe, and closed the heavy door, spinning the dial to lock it. We put the desk chair back exactly where it had been. We left the room as if we had never been there. As we walked out of the house and locked the door behind us, the world looked different. The quiet suburban streets seemed sinister, the well-kept lawns and cheerful houses hiding unknown secrets. We had the truth now. It was ugly and devastating, but it was ours. We had the evidence. The question was, what were we going to do with it? The power had shifted. The ball was now in our court. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that we were not going to just let this go. Carol had built her kingdom on a foundation of lies, and we were about to burn it to the ground. The drive home was a blur. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The evidence was sitting on our phones, a toxic collection of photos that had shattered Mark's world. When we got inside our house, he went straight to the couch and sat down, staring blankly at the wall. I had never seen him look so lost. The betrayal had hollowed him out. I knelt in front of him. "Mark," I said gently, "we have it. We have the proof. We can do something about this." He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "My own mother," he whispered. "She did this to me. All my life I tried to be a good son. I did everything she asked, and it was all a lie." "I know," I said, taking his hands. They were ice cold. "But you can't let her get away with it. We can't." The next morning, I called Sarah and asked for the name of the lawyer she had mentioned. He was a specialist in estate law and financial disputes. I made an appointment for the following day. We spent the rest of the day in a strange limbo, going through the motions of our normal life, taking care of Leo, making dinner, but it all felt unreal. The truth was a constant, humming presence in the background. The lawyer's office was in a tall glass building downtown. It felt intimidating and official. "Unethical. It's illegal." He laid out our options for us. "You have several paths you can take," he explained. "You can file a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds, plus damages. Given this evidence, you would almost certainly win. You could also take this to the district attorney. There are potential criminal charges here, including fraud and embezzlement. That could lead to jail time." Mark flinched at the words, jail time. The thought of sending his own mother to prison was horrifying, no matter what she had done. Mr. Harris seemed to understand. "There is a third option," he said. "You can use this evidence as leverage. You can confront her privately and demand restitution. You can set the terms for what you want: repayment of the money, removal of her as trustee, a formal apology. Whatever you feel would constitute justice. If she refuses, then you proceed with legal action. It gives her a chance to make this right without involving the courts, but it keeps the power firmly in your hands." This third option felt like the right one. It was powerful but not vengeful. It was about seeking justice, not just punishment. We wanted the money back, for our children's future. We wanted the lies to stop. And we wanted her to face what she had done. We thanked Mr. Harris and left his office with a clear plan. We would arrange a family meeting. We would confront Carol with the evidence and give her an ultimatum. The thought of the confrontation was terrifying, but it was necessary. That evening, Mark made the call. He was surprisingly calm, his voice steady. He called his mother's cell phone. "Mom," he said when she answered, "we need to talk." "Mark, dear." Carol's voice was cheerful, still playing the part of the loving mother who had hosted a wonderful family day at the festival. "Is everything all right?" "No," Mark said simply. "We need to talk about Grandpa's trust." The silence on the other end of the line was immediate and absolute. It stretched for several seconds. When Carol finally spoke, her voice was completely different. The warmth was gone, replaced by a thin, brittle edge of panic. "The trust? What about it? There's nothing left to talk about. It was all settled years ago." "I don't think so," Mark said, his voice hardening. "I think present a united front, to be calm, and to not let her manipulate the situation with tears or accusations." On Sunday morning, I woke up with a sense of dread. Today was the day. Today, the fragile piece of the family would be shattered for good. As we got ready, Mark was quiet and withdrawn. I could see the pain in his eyes. This was his family, his mother. No matter how justified we were, this was going to hurt him deeply. "Are you okay?" I asked, putting my hand on his shoulder. He nodded slowly. "I have to do this," he said, more to himself than to me. "For us. For our kids. I can't let her control us anymore." As we drove to their house, the same drive we had made just a week before for that awful dinner, it felt like we were heading to a battlefield. This time, we weren't there to play a part. We were there to end the show. When we arrived, the front door was ajar. We walked in without knocking. The three of them were sitting in the living room, waiting for us. The air was thick with a heavy, suffocating tension. Carol was sitting on the sofa, her back ramrod straight, her face a mask of anxious defiance. David was in his usual armchair, staring at the floor. Jenna was perched on the edge of a chair, looking confused and annoyed. "Mark, what is this all about?" she demanded as we entered. "You're acting very dramatic." Mark ignored her. He and I walked to the center of the room and stood there, facing them. We didn't sit down. We were a team, a united force. The dynamic in the room had already shifted. We were in control. I look at Carol. Her eyes dart between me and Mark, trying to get a read on the situation. She is trying to project an aura of maternal authority, but I can see the fear flickering behind her gaze. This is it, the moment of truth. Mark's voice is calm, but it carries an undeniable weight. "I know about the trust, Mom," he says. Carol's face goes white. She attempts a dismissive laugh, but it comes out as a strangled little gasp. "The trust?" "Mark, I really don't know what you're talking about," she says, her voice trembling slightly. Jenna looks from Mark to her mother, her brow furrowed in confusion.
Anymore. This has nothing to do with her, Mark says, his voice like ice. "This is about you and what you did. I have a copy of the will, Mom. I have the bank statements. I pull out my phone. I don't say a word. I just hold it up. The screen lit with the first page of the will, the title clear and undeniable. I slowly swipe through the next few photos, the page detailing the trust, the first bank statement showing the massive initial deposit, a statement showing a huge withdrawal for Jenna Real Estate Assistance. Jenna's eyes widen as she sees the screen. She stands up and takes a step closer, trying to get a better look. "What is that?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. Carol jumps to her feet. "Don't you look at that," she shrieks. "This is a private family matter. It's none of your business, but it's too late. The secret is out." David continues to stare at the floor, his silence a confession in itself. Mark begins to speak, his voice low and steady, laying out the facts one by one, like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. He details the total amount of the inheritance. He lists the major withdrawals. He talks about Jenna's house, her car, her vacations, her children's tuition. He connects every single luxury she has ever enjoyed to a specific transfer from the trust account. With every word, Jenna's face grows paler. She turns to her mother, her expression a mixture of disbelief and horror. "Mom," she says, her voice shaking, "is this true? My house? The down payment for my house? Was that from a trust? Was that Mark's money?" Carol breaks. All the fight goes out of her. She collapses back onto the sofa, her body racked with sobs. They are not the fake theatrical tears from the baby shower. These are the raw, ugly sobs of a person whose world has just crumbled around them. "I just wanted to give you the best," she wails, her words muffled by her hands. "I did it for you, Jenna. Mark was always so independent. He was fine. He didn't need it like you did. I was just trying to be a good mother." This is the confession. The final, damning admission. She doesn't deny the theft. She tries to justify it, framing storm of emotion has passed. Then, he speaks again, his voice cutting through the noise and silencing the room. "It's over," he says.
He looks directly at his mother. "Here is what is going to happen," he says, delivering the ultimatum we had prepared with the lawyer. "First, you are going to repay every single cent you took from my half of the trust, with interest, calculated from the day you were supposed to give it to me. Our lawyer has already done the math. He will be in touch with you tomorrow with the exact figure." Carol's head shoots up, her face streaked with tears and makeup. "We don't have that kind of money," she cries. "Then you will sell whatever you need to sell to get it," Mark says, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "The vacation house, your stocks, this house. I don't care how you do it. You will pay it back." He continues. "Second, you and Dad will immediately resign as trustees. The remaining funds will be transferred to a new, independent trustee of my choosing. You will never have access to that money again." David finally looks up, his face ashen. He gives a slow, defeated nod. "And third," Mark says, his voice dropping slightly as he gets to the final point, "you will apologize. Not to me. You will apologize to my wife. You will apologize for the years of insults, for the condescension, for the public humiliation, and for trying to control the size of our family to cover up your crime. You will do it now." All eyes turn to me. Carol stares at me, her face a mess of hatred and despair. For a moment, I think she is going to refuse. I can see the defiance in her eyes, but then she looks at Mark, at the cold, unyielding expression on his face, and she knows she has lost. All her power, all her control has vanished. Her voice is a choked whisper. "I'm sorry," she forces out, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. It is the most insincere apology I have ever heard, but it doesn't matter. It is not for her benefit. It is for mine. It is the sound of her defeat. "We're done here," Mark says. He takes my hand and we turn and walk out of the house. We don't look back. We leave the wreckage of their creative with the trust's finances. He said he had suspected she was giving Jenna more than her fair share, but he had never dared to look at the statements himself. He was afraid of what he would find, and even more afraid of confronting his wife. "I just let her handle it," he said, his voice thick with regret. "It was easier. I didn't want the fights, but I never knew the extent of it. I never knew she took all of yours, son. I'm so sorry. I failed you." Mark was quiet for a long time. "Yes, you did," he said finally. His voice wasn't angry, just factual. The bond between them, already strained, was now irreparably broken. David's passivity, his willful ignorance, had made him just as guilty as Carol. He had chosen his wife over his son, time and time again. There was no coming back from that. The next call was from Jenna. She was a wreck. She called me, not Mark, which I found surprising. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed into the phone. "I had no idea. I swear, I had no idea where the money was coming from. My mother, she always just said she had invested well. She made it sound like it was her money she was giving me. To think that it was Mark's, that my entire life was built on something that was stolen from my own brother. I feel sick." She told me she had confronted her mother again after we left. It had been a terrible, screaming fight. She had demanded to know why Carol had done it, why she had lied to both of her children. Carol's only defense was that she wanted Jenna to have a perfect life, something she felt Jenna deserved more than Mark. The favoritism was so deeply ingrained that she couldn't even see the crime she had committed. "I can't even look at her anymore," Jenna said. "I look at my house, my car, and I feel disgusting. My husband is furious. He wants to sell the house. He says he doesn't want to live in a house bought with stolen money." Her relationship with her mother was shattered, perhaps forever. She asked me what she could do to make things right. "That's between you and Mark and your own conscience," I told her gently. "But thank you for calling. It means a lot." I believed she was genuinely remorseful. She was answering and putting the phone on speaker. Her voice was weak and tearful, a pathetic attempt at manipulation. "Mark," she whimpered, "please, we can't do this. We'll be ruined. Can't we just Forget about this? For the sake of the family? Mark's voice was cold and calm. There is no family to speak of, he said. Your actions had consequences. We are done. He hung up the phone. We never heard from her directly again. We had gone completely no contact. Her power over us was gone. A few months later, the money was transferred into a new account, managed by a trustee of our choosing. Seeing that number in our bank account was surreal. It was a symbol of our victory, of the justice we had fought for. It was our children's future, secure and protected. Not long after, I gave birth to our second child, a beautiful, healthy baby girl we named Clara. Holding her in my arms, in the quiet peace of the hospital room, I felt a sense of profound contentment. Our family of 4 felt complete. Mark was by my side, a different man than he had been just a few months ago. He was stronger, more confident, free from the weight of his mother's control. We were a team, and we had weathered the storm together. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm rocking Clara to sleep, I think about Carol's words at the baby shower, the words that started it all. I'm glad this is your last baby. I understand now, with perfect clarity, what she meant. It was never about her concern for my well-being. It was about her fear. Her fear that another child would put more financial pressure on Mark, that it might make him look more closely at his own finances, that it might lead him to the truth she had guarded so fiercely for so long. She wanted to control the size of our family to protect her crime. I look down at my daughter's sleeping face, and then I think of my son, Leo, safe in his bed. I look at my husband, the man who finally found the strength to fight for us. She didn't get to control our family. She didn't get to decide how many children we would have or what our future would look like. We took that power back. We won. We are free. And Carol, who spent her life trying to control everyone around her, is now left with nothing. She lost her